Welcome into 101 Sports, and it is officially conference championship prediction times. Of course, there'll be playoff implications and also just the pride of getting to say you won your conference. So we're going to pick every conference championship for this weekend, including all the group of 5 games starting right now. So let's get into it. And, I forgot. Got to go over our overall record on the season so far. Last week did 4-1 in the breakdowns, but struggled in the non-breakdown games. Tulane let us down, especially. Ohio State let me down, but I was happy about that. Definitely, very happy to be wrong about that one. And I end up 93-47 and 52-18 in our breakdowns. Not bad, but we got one more week. Want to finish strong. So for the notable games, and I'll just go through all of these because I don't have too much analysis. These are my picks here. I'm going Tulane over Army, Jacksonville State over Western Kentucky, Miami of Ohio over Ohio, Louisiana over Marshall. A lot of these, I think home field plays a factor. Excuse me. Home field plays a factor. Only one, I got to admit, like the last 3, I haven't really seen these teams play much this year. So Tulane Army was the only one I had like a strong opinion on. And even though Army's going to get to host the championship and Tulane did not perform well against Memphis in the final week of the regular season, just watching these teams play, I think Tulane's a far better team. I've been really high on Tulane this whole year. I picked them to make the playoff in the preseason, and I really thought they had a good chance of it before they lost the Memphis game. I thought they had a really good chance of it and kind of let that slip away for them. But you still have a chance to win your conference, call it a successful season in year one with the new coach. I think they're going to do that. I think their passing game will be too potent for Army, and I don't think Army will be able to keep pace with their high-scoring offense. The other 3 games, I haven't seen much of them play. No strong opinions either way. Kind of just a gut feel thing there. So now we get into the not just the Power 4 and the Mountain West breakdowns. And we're actually going to start with the Mountain West breakdown because it is on Friday, and it has very big playoff implications, as I think this is probably a play-in game for the college football playoff. I think winners in, losers out. So kind of like that college basketball vibe when you're in a small conference and you play, and the conference is only going to get one automatic bid into the tournament, and they're probably going to get no at-large bids. Kind of that feel here for the Mountain West. And getting into the keys to the game, the first one I went with is the Boise State passing game, because we know Ashton Genty's their best player. He might win the Heisman. Probably Travis Hunter wins it, but he's right there having a historic season, a really great player. And we know UNLV is going to commit a ton of resources to stopping Genty. If Maddox Madsen in this Boise State passing game can keep them honest, give more, you can't prevent them from loading the box too much, give more Genty more to work with, then he can have a bigger game, and the offense overall is just much more potent. But they have to show that UNLV needs to defend the passing game and have a more balanced defense. And if they can't do that and UNLV is just loading up, stopping the run, there's a decent chance UNLV could win this game that style. Second, I thought Boise State home field is a pretty big advantage. I think getting to play in Idaho on that blue turf, I think the crowd is going to heavily favor Boise, and they're going to be really excited because if you win this game, they know they're going to be in the college football playoff, potentially even getting a first-round bye. And I think that home environment for Boise is going to play a very big role. And they've already beaten UNLV, but they beat them on the road on a Friday. I think a home Friday night game for Boise could be a huge advantage for them. Third, I went with Ricky White for UNLV. He's their star receiver and just their best player overall. He can disrupt the game in terms of special teams. He can catch screens. They might get a handoff every now and then. But yeah, he's the best receiver, over 1,000 yards on the season, and a really good special teams player, and he has a chance to have a huge impact on the game. And I think for UNLV to win, he needs to have one of his best performances. And he's won, I guess technically they lost the Syracuse game, but, not technically, they did lose. But the only reason they were in that game is Ricky White blocking punts and having a big day receiving. So I think he just has to have one of those star games to give UNLV a shot to win. And then finally, Ashton Genty, because we know he's going to have at least probably 125 yards. But what's the dip? Is it going to be closer to like, 30 some carries, 125, not too many yards per carry? Or is it going to be one of those like what he just did against Oregon State, going for like 220 something? Like, how big of a day is it going to be for Ashton Genty? Is a Heisman winning performance or just a really good running back performance? Because we know it's going to be a great day for him. It's just how great. And if it is like one of his historic, like just, wow, this guy's incredible type of games, Boise State, I believe, will win this game. And though I'm not confident he'll have like an all-time performance, I do think he'll get at least 150 on the ground, and I think Maddox Madsen will perform decently through the air. Combine that with the home field, I do think it's going to be a little bit too much for UNLV to overcome. If this was on a neutral site, I actually probably would have picked UNLV. I didn't like how Boise State's been playing recently. Home field is enough for me, enough of an edge for me to pick Boise State 28-25, meaning they would get to be in the college football playoff, maybe get a bye. If you stay tuned for the end of the video, I will show you my predictions for what the final playoff bracket will look like, but they would be in it. Now we can move on to the Power 4 breakdowns, and we're going to start with the Big 12, where Arizona State takes on Iowa State. Battle of, the similar colors, that yellow and maroon type of thing. And again, this is another one, like the Mountain West, it's kind of a play-in spot. You'll probably, in all likelihood, the Big 12's only getting one team in, and it's going to be the winner of this game. Loser, you're probably on the outside looking in. Maybe you guys disagree that's the way like it should be. Maybe you think the Big 12 doesn't get the respect it deserves. That's a different argument. But just based off what the committee has shown, how they value these conferences, the winner of this game is the only team from the Big 12 going to get in, and they might not even get the first round bye. We'll see about that. Again, stay tuned for the end of the video. And getting into the keys to the game, the first one's got to be the Iowa State run defense. And it's been kind of a mixed bag this season. In a couple of the games, well, the only two games they lost, against Texas Tech and Kansas, Devin Neal and Taj Brooks, two really good running backs, had really good days against Iowa State and were one of the main reasons Iowa State lost those games. But then you look when they played Kansas State last week, and given it was different conditions, so it was harder to throw the ball, so maybe easier to play run defense. But DJ Giddens, who's another really good running back, didn't have as good of a day. And they've stopped some other good backs, but probably the best two they played were Neal and Brooks. And those are more the backs on the caliber of what Cam Scatabo is for Arizona State, who probably should be a Heisman finalist, in my opinion. He's that good. He's had that much of an impact for the Sun Devils. And I think Iowa State's run defense, if it has one of those games where they're not playing as well, it could be a long day for them. Second, I think the ASU pass defense is going to be huge because you've got Noel and you got Higgins, who can make big plays in the passing game for Iowa State. They've got a solid run game as well. But yeah, if ASU can't guard their big-time playmakers, who are probably the best pair of receivers that they've had to face all year, and like ASU, he just played Arizona, who has T-Mac. It's hard for me to say his name, but we know Arizona hasn't been performing well at all. And even your other big wins like Kansas State, BYU don't have the caliber of passing game and receivers that Iowa State does. And that's why this next key game I put in here as well, and that's Iowa State experience. When you have these guys who've been here, like a Noel, a Higgins, even a Rocco Beck, who I'll talk about more in a second. And if you guys, well, you probably didn't, but the first video I made on this channel was, does returning production matter in college football? And like I did statistical analysis, found out it was statistically significant that it did lead to improvement in wins. And then we determined which team was most likely to benefit from it based off like historical trends. And the answer was Iowa State. And I said to say they're clearly the more experienced team. And when you have a situation like this where it's going to be high pressure, ASU, none of them have ever been in this situation. It's a really young team for the most part. And yes, Iowa State hasn't been in a position to make the playoff, but these guys have been there for a little bit now, maybe can handle that pressure a little bit better, and that's something to look at. And then finally, Rocco Beck versus Sam Leavitt. I think Rocco Beck has delivered in clutch moments this year, but over the full stretch of a game, I think he's been a little disappointing. He hasn't played as well as I thought he would, but it's been okay because he's delivered when they need him most. And then Sam Leavitt over the past few games, I think he's because he's a young guy, redshirt freshman, he has found it. Like, he clearly is going to be a really good quarterback for ASU for at least next year, probably a couple more years. And I think he's hit a groove. He's playing his best ball of the season right when you want him to. And I think there's a decent chance he outplays Rocco Beck. But again, with the experience and Beck delivering the clutch, if this is a close game, you would think it would favor them. And that's why I don't feel great about my pick, because I do think this game's going to be tight. And I do think a lot of the indicators favor Iowa State there, like Beck, how he's played there, having more experience. I think a lot of that points to Iowa State. But I'm picking ASU to win it 31-28 just because the momentum of the program, it feels like Iowa State kind of lost a bit of steam at the end of the year. ASU's picking it up. It feels like they're going to be harder to stop. It feels like Cam Scatabo is going to have a huge day. I know Jordan Tyson's out, and I think that's going to lead Cam Scatabo to play even better. Sam Levitt's playing his best ball. And so even though they haven't been here before, too much momentum on this Arizona State team for me to disregard, even though I do think a lot of indicators point to Iowa State. Going to get maybe a little bit illogical pick here, but it's just a gut feeling thing. I think ASU is going to win this game and advance to the college football playoff. Our third game we're breaking down is the SEC title, and this one a rematch between Texas and Georgia. And unlike the other two games, even though Georgia's a two-loss team, I'm sure if you watched Georgia Tech, you heard Georgia's already secured their playoff spot. Yes, they said it like 100 times during the broadcast. If Georgia beats Georgia Tech, there's no way they drop out, because we all know college football commentators determine who the committee puts in the playoff. Anyways, though, let's just get into the keys to the game. And the first one, I think, is the line of scrimmage, because basically just because of the first game we saw Texas get dominated on the line of scrimmage. Their offensive line, which was supposed to be the best in the country, it was shocking how bad they performed against Georgia. And then they allowed Georgia to run the ball really effectively, not like crazy effectively, but compared to how Georgia had been running the ball, it was pretty shocking to see that as well. And overall, we're just dominated on the lines of scrimmage. And now this week, Kelvin Banks, your best offensive lineman, probably a little banged up, probably not going to play his best. More questions on the line of scrimmage there. Second, I think it's Beck versus Ewers, because in the first game, both were bad. Both turned the ball all over a lot. And I think having seen that, Georgia and Texas are probably going to play it a little safer, especially Texas, when you're like, okay, we maybe have the best defense in the country. We can't give, like last time you gave Georgia so many short fields that the game got out of hand. But if you just avoid turnovers, avoid those short fields, it's a much more competitive game. And on the Georgia side, we've seen Carson Beck have, three turnover games, thrown a lot of interceptions this year. And you can't have him do that because this Texas defense is really good and can definitely force those. But for Georgia, I think it's going to be hard to score points, and you can't be turning the ball over. That would be probably too difficult to overcome considering how well Texas is playing right now. So I think you got to have a good Carson Beck game, like really, not really good, but he's got to play well. And then Ewers, I think more of just got to keep doing what he's been doing. Just low turnover, more of a game manager style role. Don't force anything that could kind of cost you the game. Next, I got the Georgia receivers. Like I said, this Texas defense may be the best in the country, so I think there aren't going to be too many opportunities to make huge plays downfield, and these Georgia receivers lead the country in drops. So when those opportunities arise, these Georgia receivers have to step up and catch the ball. Pretty much every big game I've watched Georgia in, there's been at least one play early in the game where they take a deep shot. I remember in the Alabama game. I remember in the Tennessee game. I can't remember if it was in the Texas game or not, but I mean, it probably was. It even happened against Georgia Tech. They take a deep shot, and Carson Beck throws like one of his best throws of the game, and a receiver drops it on what could be a massive play to start the game. If one of those comes up again, or at any point in the game, you need a Colby Young or a London Humphreys or any of these guys who are going to be on the field for Georgia receiver. You can't drop the ball. You got to come down with it. It's too big of a spot. And then finally, Arch Manning. Little wrinkle that Steve Sarkisian added against A&M with those Arch Manning runs on like important third downs is really interesting, because we know Quinn Ewers already is not the most mobile guy, and might be still a little banged up, a little even less mobile. Didn't look like too bad in the A&M game, but we know he's definitely not as mobile as Arch. And if they add that wrinkle of the running quarterback and like a specific package into this game, that could give the Georgia defense something new to look at, maybe something else that causes some problems for them. And I think that could be a key to the game. So who am I picking? I do think when you look at over the course of the season, Texas is playing better than Georgia is right now. You just beat A&M. You're the one-loss team. Georgia, you almost lose to Georgia Tech. You lost to Ole Miss recently. They have not been playing great football. And all I think is that reminds me of exactly what it was like when these teams played the first time. Texas was getting hyped as probably the best team in the country. People are comparing them to Kirby Smart's old Georgia teams or Nick Saban's Alabama. People are saying Georgia, they don't have it this year. And it's in Texas. There's no chance. This game, it's going to be more of a neutral site. I mean, it's in Georgia, but Texas travels really well. And I think when you have all this doubt that's going to be said throughout the week, Kirby's been in this spot. He's going to know how to prepare his team for this spot. I think Georgia's going to win the SEC title. Give me Bulldogs 27-21. I think it's much more competitive than the first time because I don't think there'll be a crazy amount of turnovers, which, will not cause as much variation in the result. And I think Georgia's going to make enough big plays on the defense and the offensive side of the ball, play one of their better games of the season, and I think they're going to win the SEC title again. Well, they didn't win last year, but you know what I mean. They've won before. Fourth game we're predicting, or is this fourth or fifth? Fourth. Lose track here. And it's Clemson against SMU for the ACC title. This one's an interesting one because Clemson wins, they're in, they lose, they're out. SMU, though, we don't know for sure until the committee reveals the rankings tonight, probably. Then we could probably figure out if they would be in or not with a loss, depending on how high they are. Maybe even then we wouldn't know because there's no precedent for what the committee's going to do to conference champions or conference championship runner-ups. So teams that lose the conference championship, how much will the committee punish them, if at all? Getting into the keys to the game, I think a big one is, and the one that jumps out to me is Kevin Jennings' running ability, just because of how much Clemson struggled with Lenore Sellers on the ground and scrambles. Clemson clearly got pressure, which I'll talk about more, but it's hard to wrap up. And when you escaped, there was really no second level for Clemson that was stopping these runs. Now, I will say Lenore Sellers, a bigger guy than Jennings, more capable of breaking tackles, but Jennings a quick guy and can make plays with his legs, which I think he's going to need to do to beat Clemson. Then I think Clemson explosive plays are huge because when the Clemson offense is hitting their explosive plays on a lot of those deep shots downfield to guys like Wesco, Moore, Williams, and Cade Klubnik throws a pretty nice deep ball. When they're hitting those, the offense can be one of the better offenses in the country. But when you take those away and they have to play underneath, that's what we see, the offense scoring 17 points, 14 points against South Carolina, maybe 21, like those low-scoring games instead of those 40-some point explosions against some of the weaker teams that can't take away the explosive plays. Third, I think the Clemson sacks are going to be huge. Their pass rush is elite. When you have guys like Peter Woods, TJ Parker, they're going to get to the quarterback. Question is, can Jennings escape, prevent them from sacking him? And then because in the South Carolina game, there was at least 3 plays I saw where Clemson's there and Sellers gets out of it. Clemson's got to actually bring him home. And then if you're not bringing him home, you got to at least get there and disrupt in the passing game as well. If Clemson can consistently be in the backfield causing disruption, it's a huge edge for them. And then fourth, I think the SMU line of scrimmage play and really just overall talent deficit. This is the first time this year, even playing their full ACC schedule, they never faced Miami, and in their out-of-conference, their big game was BYU, and you never played Clemson. You played Florida State, but Florida State was really bad this year. So you haven't – it's like when Indiana played Ohio State, and you hadn't seen any of the athletes of that caliber, really. SMU hasn't seen a team with as talented of players as Clemson, specifically on the line of scrimmage. There's a world where this game happens and Clemson just leans on SMU. They're able to run the ball well with Maffa, and SMU can't block Woods and Parker and the Clemson D-line, and the linebackers are there, and they're just too talented for SMU, and we just don't know it yet because SMU hasn't been faced with a team with this much talent. That world definitely exists. I don't think it'll necessarily happen where it'll be like crazy, but I do think it's a significant edge for Clemson in terms of talent. And I think Dabo, there's a lot of pressure here. You lost your rivalry now. They thought you were knocked out of the playoff. I think you got to come through in this one. I think Cade Klubnik, you got to have a good game. You guys have been given a second chance. I think you have to make the most of it. Yes, SMU performed better, but you're the more talented team across the board. You recruit better. You're like the brand name here. You've got to win this game. And I think they're going to do it barely. I think it'll be really competitive, but I think Clemson will come through with a win. And I'm going 23-20, a really tight one, barely win it. I think they're going to do it, though. That one, I will say, out of all the conference titles, I would say this one was the hardest to pick for me just because I think Clemson will win, but I just don't trust Clemson at this point to win big games or perform well against quality teams. But I keep picking them, and they keep letting me down. I don't know why I do it. Finally, well, our final game, again, we'll give what the playoff would look like after. But we're ending it with the Big Ten title, where Penn State is taking on Oregon in what might be probably 1-3 in the country. Will be what this is. I would assume is what the committee's going to rank them tonight. Not what I would rank Penn State. Definitely not. But big game. Obviously, Oregon wins. They're going to be the number 1 overall seed in the bracket. If they lose, I would imagine you would drop them to 5, I would think. And then Penn State, you win, you're going to be either the 1 or the 2. And then if you lose, you're going to be like probably, 5, 6, 7, maybe 8. I don't know. Again, no precedent for how they would drop these teams that lose conference championships. Keys to the game. First one, I think the Penn State pass defense. This Penn State defense is supposed to be really, really good. But I think we saw USC with Miller Moss and those really good receivers they have, like a Zachariah Branch, Malachi Lemon, Jacoby Lane, make big plays. And I think that them and Ohio State were clearly the 2 best passing attacks Penn State saw. They did better against Ohio State. They lost that game, though. And I think Oregon's better than either of them because they combine like the great wide receivers with the great quarterback with how Dylan Gabriel is playing. You're going to have Trayshawn Holden playing well. Evan Stewart, you saw what he did to Ohio State. If Tej Johnson's healthy, we know what he's capable of. Just so much perimeter talent. And Penn State has a good pass defense, but I don't think they faced anything like this. And it's going to be a really big test. I don't know that they're up for it. Then I think the Penn State stars, specifically I'm talking about Abdul Carter and Tyler Warren. When I look at these teams, although Penn State's going to be ranked 3rd in the country, I think Oregon is clearly the better team. I think Gabriel is better than Drew Aller. I don't think that's controversial. Gabriel might be a Heisman finalist. They have the better perimeter talent. They have the better line of scrimmage talent probably with how that D-line's playing and how the O-line has stepped up. But Penn State, when you have a guy like Abdul Carter, who could be the first pick in the draft, we saw Oregon early in the year when they played Idaho and Boise State. Why were those games close? Because they were not blocking well and allowing sacks. And then the O-line, when it got healthy, put it all together, stopped giving up sacks, stopped allowing so much pressure. They took off as the best team in the country. Abdul Carter can wreak havoc, and he has to. He has to win his matchup all day long, cause problems, throw off Gabriel, throw off the timing of this offense, force them to run the ball. Because Penn State, I trust to stop the run. It's more of my questions are on the perimeter. But if you can't block Abdul Carter and there's not time to throw, that's a huge edge. Carter's got to step up. And then Tyler Warren, and it's not all on him. Like, I trust he's going to play well. But him, Andy Koldy-Nicky, James Franklin, you got to have a game plan to involve Warren a ton, like you did against USC. Can't let him fade into the background, kind of how you did against Ohio State. You got to allow your stars to be your stars. And even further, Drew Aller, he's your star quarterback. He's got to have one of his best games of his career. Nick Singleton, got to have a good day running. Even if you're not going to torch Oregon on the ground, maybe get him the ball on a screen a couple of times. Get the ball in his hands. He's one of your better playmakers. The stars for Penn State have to play like stars because I think they're the less talented team and the worst team here. So your best players have to give you some sort of edge. Third, the Oregon D-line. When you have Jordan Birch and Mateo Uiagalelei and Derek Harmon and all those guys on that Oregon D-line, it's going to be tough for Penn State to run. It's going to be tough for Penn State to avoid pressure. And this is a Penn State offense that I already don't think is great. So if you take away the run game and it's tough to throw, they're going to, there's only so many trick plays Koldy-Nicky's going to have for Oregon. So if you take that away just by winning on the line of scrimmage, which I think is certainly possible, Oregon will win this game for sure. And then finally, the James Franklin big game. I mean, everyone knows he doesn't beat Ohio State and Michigan, and he loses the top 10 matchups. Well, this is going to be one of those games where Penn State fans are going to really want to win it, and you're going to be facing the number 1 team in the country, and James Franklin traditionally doesn't win in the spots. Maybe someday he overcomes it, but until then, it's at least got to be mentioned, and I don't think this is going to be the weekend he overcomes it. I've got Oregon by 2 touchdowns, 38-24. This one was easy for me. I think Oregon has the better quarterback, the better receivers, is better on the line of scrimmage, just as good in the run game. I think they're better coached. I think they're better or more well rested because of how late their bye week was. I just don't see the edge for Penn State in this game for why I would pick them. I've clearly got Oregon winning this matchup. Now that's all the conference championship games. So now let me reveal what I think the college football playoff bracket would look like in this scenario. So here it is. This is what I think it would look like. All right, so let's break this down. At 12, I think Clemson winning the ACC but having 3 losses would be the 12 seed because they're clearly still going to be ranked behind, I believe, South Carolina, who I think would be stuck behind Ole Miss and Alabama. Now, in this scenario, though I think SMU deserves to still be in the playoff. Me personally, I would put SMU in because I don't think you should be punished for the conference title game. I don't think that's what the committee would do. I think they would move Clemson. I think they would drop SMU below Clemson, put in another SEC team, and I think that team would be Alabama. I think it won't be South Carolina because of the head-to-head, and I think they'll compare Alabama and Ole Miss, and they already have, and they've told us Alabama is higher. Now, this could be proven wrong tonight when the rankings drop, because if the committee has Miami above Alabama, even after the Syracuse loss, which I would agree with, I would have Miami higher, then they would be in this 11 spot, and I would have SMU in this spot. But I don't think the committee would do that. 10, Indiana, not very controversial. 9, Tennessee, not controversial. What's interesting here is Penn State, because they lose to Oregon convincingly, though they were, in the Big Ten title, I think now having 2 losses with the head-to-head advantage going to Ohio State, I think Penn State would drop all the way below Ohio State to 8. Ohio State gets 7 because although Penn State could potentially rematch Oregon, the committee's not supposed to look at that. I don't know if they will or not. Then Notre Dame, I've got 6. And then Texas, I got 5 because losing a tight game to Georgia, and they're probably going to be ranked 2. I think they would stay ahead of Notre Dame. And then in the top 4, Oregon and Georgia, I think are pretty clear cut. What's controversial, I think if ASU beats Iowa State, I think the committee would jump them above Boise. I could be wrong. I could be wrong on that. I think the committee's going to do that, though. I don't think they're going to get Boise the 3 seed. That one kind of just a hunch based on prior, like how they've acted towards group of 5 teams in the past. Now, again, this is not how I would rank the teams. If my results happened, SMU would still be in the playoff. And yeah, the bracket would be different. But this is a prediction based off my predictions, what would the bracket look like based off what I think the committee will do. I hope that all makes sense. That is all for the video. Look out for a reaction potentially for the college football rankings tonight if anything crazy happens. I thank you guys all for watching. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, and until next time.